I'm 30 years old, and I share a house with my sister. It's a two-floor mother-daughter style home, which basically means there are two separate kitchens. She lives downstairs, and I live upstairs. She is rarely home because she spends most nights with her boyfriend, who lives about 20 miles away. And yeah, I know, I'm 30 years old. Being alone in my own house should not scare me anymore. But sometimes it does. This happened on a night when I was by myself upstairs, sitting in the living room watching a horror movie. My section of the house has an open layout. The living room, dining area, and kitchen are all connected in one large space. My couch sits in the center of that space, facing the television. That means a big portion of the room is directly behind me while I watch TV. If you are even slightly jumpy, that setup is not ideal for watching something scary alone at night. I will admit, with the room completely dark, except for the glow of the television, I kept glancing over my shoulder. I like to think I am not the only grown man who does that. After the movie ended, I brushed my teeth, shut off all the lights upstairs, and went to bed. I slept for about 2 hours. Around 1 a.m., I suddenly woke up. At first, I had no idea what pulled me out of sleep. Then I heard a voice downstairs. It sounded exactly like my sister. It did not sound like she was outside trying to get in. It sounded like she was already inside her part of the house. I could not make out what she was saying, but in my half-asleep state, I was convinced it was her. I assumed maybe she was calling up to me or arguing with her boyfriend. So I got out of bed and stepped into the completely dark hallway. I turned on the hallway light, walked through my living room, and heard her voice again from downstairs. This time it sounded like she was saying my name. I started heading down the stairs, still in the dark, calling back to her, asking what she needed. When I reached the bottom, I fumbled around trying to find the light switch in the foyer. I was still extremely groggy and not fully awake. I walked down the short hallway toward her kitchen, finally found a switch and flipped it on. The kitchen light came on, slowly brightening her entire downstairs space, including the living room. No one was there. Not my sister, not her boyfriend. The place was completely empty. I checked her bedroom next. It was empty too. I stood there and called her name loudly one more time. No answer. But just seconds after I yelled, I heard something fall to the floor inside her bedroom. The same bedroom I had just looked through and confirmed was empty. That was enough for me. I rushed back upstairs like a scared kid and locked myself in my room. I grabbed my phone and tried calling her a few times. She did not pick up. I sat there in my room, trying to convince myself I had imagined the whole thing. Eventually, I must have fallen back asleep. The next morning, I woke up to text from her asking why I'd called at 1 a.m. I asked if she had come home at any point during the night. She said no. She had stayed at her boyfriend's place. Later that morning, I went back downstairs to check her bedroom, hoping to find whatever had fallen and made that noise. There was nothing on the floor, not a single object out of place that could have explained what I heard. I want to believe I hallucinated it all. That feels like the safer explanation, because the other possibility is something I do not even want to consider. What really unsettles me is how real it felt. I heard her voice clearly. I heard something hit the floor. I have never experienced hallucinations before, and I do not have any known sleep issues, which makes that night even harder to explain. I spent a lot of time home alone when I was a kid. My mom was single for much of my childhood and worked as a registered nurse with a terrible schedule that included overnight shifts. My older brother had already left for college, so it was often just me in the house. This happened on a night when my mom was working overnight. It was the weekend, and I had invited a girl named Molly over. We had been talking for a while, and she came by to hang out. We watched a couple of movies and just relaxed. After a while, she had to head home because her parents did not like her staying out late. Once she left, I was alone in the house again. I stayed in my bedroom upstairs, lying in bed and watching TV. My room faced the backyard. The deck sat directly below my window. At some point, I heard the loud scraping sound of one of the deck chairs being dragged across the wood. I got up and looked out the window. There was someone sitting in one of the chairs. At first, I assumed it was Molly playing some kind of joke on me, since she had only left about 10 minutes earlier. I called out her name. The person looked up toward my window. It was not Molly. I instantly ducked away from the window so he would not see me clearly. I did not recognize him at all, at least not in the dark. My heart started pounding. I grabbed my phone and texted a few close friends in our group chat, asking if one of them was outside my house messing with me. The ones who replied said no and wanted to know what I meant. Honestly, I did not really believe any of them would drive over just to scare me like that. Still terrified, but needing to know if he was gone, I slowly stepped back toward the window and looked down again. He was still there, sitting in the chair, staring straight up at my bedroom window. It was definitely a man, and it was obvious he had seen me. I quickly stepped away from the window and turned off my TV. I curled up on my bed with my knees pulled to my chest and my arms wrapped around them. I sat there in complete darkness. I did not even want to turn on my phone screen because I was afraid he would see the light from outside. I barely moved. My window was open, and I was scared he would hear any sound I made. I hoped he would think I had left the room. I stayed like that for what felt like forever, but it must have been about 5 minutes. I convinced myself there was no way he was still out there. Finally, I forced myself to stand up and look again. When I saw that he was still sitting there, still staring up at me, it felt like my stomach dropped. This time, I did not run away from the window. I tried to sound brave and called down to him, asking what he wanted. That was when I noticed his shoulders moving up and down like he was laughing hard. At first, there was no sound. Then I heard a faint whistling noise coming from him. It sounded like he was laughing so intensely that he was wheezing. I told him to please leave. Then I stepped away from the window again and went back to my bed. For some reason, I was too scared to call the police. Instead, I left my room and sat at the top of the stairs, listening carefully. I heard the back door being pushed. He was trying to get inside. I ran back into my room and hid again. I was only 14. I had no idea what to do. A little later, I heard the front door handle being rattled. He tried pushing on the front door too. Thankfully, he stopped after a short time. I shut my bedroom window and closed the curtains. If the doors had not been locked, I honestly believe he could have gotten in. At 14, I was skinny, weak, and not someone who could defend himself. I stayed locked in my room for the rest of the night until my mom came home around 9 in the morning. When I told her everything, she was angry that I had not called 911. Looking back, she was right. Not calling was incredibly stupid. It is one of many things I did, or failed to do, when I was young that I still question to this day. This is the story of the night I almost died as a kid, left home alone during what turned into one of the most terrifying nights of my life. There were 5 of us in my family. I was 10 years old at the time. My older brother was 14, and my little sister was 5. It was a Friday night. My brother had gone out with his friends, probably getting into trouble, because at some point, a phone call came in that completely changed the mood in our house. I was in my room playing a Star Wars game when I suddenly heard my mom start crying hysterically. I panicked and ran out of my room to see what was going on. My mom was on the phone with the hospital. Someone was telling her that my brother had been hit by a car. The moment felt unreal. We were all shaken and terrified. I found out his leg was broken, but I do not remember much else from that call. My parents rushed to grab their coats. They went to get my little sister from her room and then asked me if I would be okay staying home alone. I told them yes. Within seconds, they were out the door and driving to the hospital. I was extremely worried about my brother, but I also did not want to see him in a hospital bed, possibly covered in injuries. I do not think my parents wanted my sister or me to see him like that either, but they could not leave a 5-year-old home alone. For context, my brother eventually made a full recovery, and his injury does not really matter to this story, beyond being the reason I was alone that night. Before my dad left, he tried to calm my mom down, reassuring her that my brother would be fine. Seeing my dad stay somewhat composed helped me feel a little better. I figured my mom was reacting the way any scared mother would. After they left, I went back to my room and kept playing my Star Wars game for a couple more hours. At some point, I heard the front door open. My bedroom door was closed. By then it was well past midnight, long after my bedtime. I shut off the TV and my PlayStation and climbed into bed with my Game Boy. I listened carefully, expecting to hear my parents talking downstairs, or maybe my brother's voice with them. I heard nothing. After several minutes passed without the sound of footsteps on the stairs, I started to feel uneasy. I quietly opened my bedroom door and stepped out onto the upstairs landing. From there, I could look over the railing into the living room below. The lights were off, but I could clearly make out 3 tall figures standing in the living room. They were not my family. Fear completely froze me for a second. Then I slowly backed into my room and tried to close the door as gently as I could. In my panic, it still made a slight clicking sound. It was not quiet enough. I was certain they heard it. I rushed to my closet, opened the door carefully, stepped inside, and shut it behind me. I crouched down behind piles of boxes and bags filled with clothes. From where I was sitting, I was mostly hidden from view. Then came the worst part. Time felt like it stopped as I waited for my bedroom door to open. And it did. The sound of the door creaking open made my heart slam into my throat. I heard footsteps enter the room. I could not tell if it was one person or more. The footsteps moved toward my bed. I heard my blankets being touched and shifted around. Then silence. More footsteps moved closer to the closet. Silence again. A few seconds later, the closet door opened. I stopped breathing. I just sat there completely still, barely daring to inhale. The door remained open for what felt like forever. I refused to look up. I did not move a single muscle. There were about 20 seconds of total silence before the closet door slowly closed again. I heard footsteps retreat from the closet and then leave my bedroom. Only then did I finally look up. As I did, a horrifying thought crossed my mind. From where I had been crouched behind the boxes and bags, it was possible that I had not been as hidden as I thought. Nearly an hour later, I heard my parents come back home. I ran downstairs to them immediately. The front door had been left slightly open by the intruders. Several valuables had been taken from the house. That night spiraled from one nightmare into another for our family. In their rush to get to the hospital, my parents had forgotten to lock the door. I was incredibly lucky. If those people had wanted more than just valuables, I could have been killed or taken. Even now, I sometimes think about the person who opened that closet door and stood there in silence for 20 seconds. Did he see me hiding there and choose to walk away? Was he only there to steal, not to harm anyone? Or did I simply get lucky and he never noticed me at all? It is a question that still chills me to this day. There was one time when I was a teenager, still living with my parents, that I had the house to myself for an entire week. That almost never happened, because my parents rarely traveled. But my mom had a wealthy friend named Patty, who offered to pay for a trip and invited both of them along. I am an only child, so that meant I stayed home alone. We lived in Newark, Ohio, in Licking County. Yes, that was really the name of the county. Our house backed up to a stretch of woods, and sat on a quiet road where only a handful of cars would pass each day. The backyard was pretty big. We had a large deck that overlooked the woods, a small fish pond, and an above-ground pool. This happened on a Thursday night in July of 2013. I remember because earlier that day, I had been texting friends about plans for the weekend. That night I was outside on the deck, smoking weed with music playing from my speaker. That is when everything started. I thought I heard someone's voice coming from the woods. I turned the music down and listened carefully. It did not happen again right away, so I turned the music back up. A few moments later, with the music playing louder, I heard the voice again. This time I shut the music off completely and listened longer. Sure enough, I heard a man's voice call out from the trees, saying, "Hey, over here." He sounded a little distant, but not far. The woods were only about 20 to 30 yards from the deck, and that was clearly where the voice was coming from. At first, I did not think it had anything to do with me. I figured maybe some teenagers were playing a game in the woods. Then the voice called again, "Hey, over here, we need help." Now I felt uneasy. The voice was much deeper than a kid's, and when someone yells that they need help, that is automatically concerning. I started wondering if he was actually talking to me. Then I heard him shout, "Straight in front of you, please come help us." The voice was coming from directly ahead of me in the trees. That is when I realized it probably was meant for me. Reluctantly, I called back, "Who is that?" The voice answered, "We just need help. We are stuck in the woods." I replied, "What does that mean?" He said again, "Just please come help straight in front of you." I stood up from my chair, walked down the deck steps onto the grass, and started moving toward the woods. I called out, "I am coming. Where are you?" The response came instantly, "Right in front of you. I see you." That stopped me for a second. I asked, "Wait, are you alone or with someone?" There was no response this time. I froze about halfway between the house and the woods. A strong, bad feeling settled in my stomach. I slowly began walking backward toward the deck. I did not even want to turn my back to the trees, because it finally hit me how suspicious this was. I made it back up onto the deck, and the voice did not say another word. If the person really saw me and truly needed help, they would have said something like, "Where are you going?" Instead, there was silence. For all I knew, there could have been more than one person out there. The whole story about being stuck in the woods made no sense. If they could see me clearly, how were they stuck? What were they stuck on? I went inside and locked every door just to be safe. I sat in the living room for a while, still high. Looking back, I think being high made me more relaxed and trusting at first. Then I heard the voice again, but this time it was closer. It was not coming from the woods anymore. It sounded like it was in the backyard. I heard water splashing, maybe from the pool or the pond. I rushed to the window to look outside. At first, I did not see anyone. Then I heard him say, "I see you," followed by a laugh. That is when I spotted him. At least one man was visible. He was hiding behind the pool on the far side. I could only see his head. It was too dark to make out any details other than his medium-length dark hair. I quickly shut the blinds and tried to ignore him. I figured maybe if I did not react, he would get bored and leave. He seemed like the type of person who enjoyed frightening people, and I did not want to give him that satisfaction. Then came the breaking point. There was a loud, violent pounding on the same window where I had just closed the blinds. From the other side of the glass, the man started screaming help. I screamed back as loud as I could, telling him to get the hell away and that the police were on their way. I kept shouting it over and over, trying to sound more unhinged than he was. Through the glass, I heard him begin to laugh. The sound slowly faded, and I assumed he was walking away. I collapsed back onto the couch, shaking and struggling to catch my breath. I stayed there for a long time. Eventually, it seemed like he was really gone. Strangely, I still managed to sleep well that night, probably because weed helps me knock out. Sometimes I wonder if I would have handled things differently if I had been completely sober. That night definitely changed how I feel about strangers and who I trust enough to open a door for.